Pas de soleil, 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 pas de soleil.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Adulting with Hannah. I'm Hannah, here today to talk about books. We're talking about books. I just want to talk about the books I've read this year. We're just going to talk about them. I've read, I didn't even count, 10, 11, 12 books this year. 12, that's a good number for we're halfway through the year. So by the end of the year, I should be able to have read 24 books, which is 2 books a month. So that's pretty good. That's a pretty good goal. Sometimes I get a little intimidated by some people on the internet who review books and talk about books, whom I admire very much, but they're like, I read 107 books this year, and that was 10 books less than I wanted to read. Oh no. And I'm like, it's like 2 books a week. What? I think 2 books a month is pretty good. A lot of these are like pretty popular books, so if there's, a book that you've been wondering about, it might be in this video. And I'll list them all below in case, you don't want to waste your time. But, if you watched this video, that would be cool too. I'd really appreciate it. You know what else I'd really appreciate? If you could like this video and subscribe. And you can wait until the end to see if you like the video or not, but I have lots of other types of content on my channel, and I would love for you to stick around. First up, we have Local Woman Missing by Mary Kubica. This book kind of changed my life. It's to the point where I liked this book so much that I've been trying to find a book that I like as much ever since, and I haven't. I started this book January 1st, and I finished this book January 1st. I stayed up until 3 in the morning. I am not like a stay up late type of person. Like, I'm a go to bed at 9 type of person. I was up till 3 o'clock finishing this book. So this book, again, Mary Kubica, phenomenal. I think this is like one of her newer books, but it's the story of a woman who is local, who goes missing. Here's the summary. Shelby Tebow is the first to go missing. Not long after, Meredith Dickey and her 6-year-old daughter Delilah vanished just blocks away from where Shelby was last seen, striking fear into their once peaceful community. Are these incidents connected? After an elusive search that yields more questions than answers, the case eventually gets cold. Now, 11 years later, Delilah shockingly returns. Everyone wants to know what happened to her, but no one is prepared for what they'll find. I don't even want to talk about this one too much because I just want you to read it, okay? Next, we have It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. Did I talk about this one in my last video? I might have. I'm sorry. I made a video at the beginning of the year of all the books I read, and that one might have been in it. And Local Woman Missing might have been in it. I don't know. Sorry. I hated this book. Hated it. Didn't like it at all. Lily hasn't always had it easy, but that's never stopped her from working hard for the life she wants. She's come a long way from the small town where she grew up. She graduated from college, moved to Boston, started her own business, and when she feels a spark with a gorgeous neurosurgeon named Ryle Kincaid, everything in Lily's life seems too good to be true. Ryle is assertive, stubborn, maybe even a little arrogant. He's also sensitive, brilliant, and a total soft spot for Lily. The way he looks in scrubs certainly doesn't hurt. Lily can't get him out of her head, but Ryle's complete aversion to relationships is disturbing, even as Lily finds herself becoming the exception to his no dating rule. She can't help but wonder what made him the way he is in the first place. As questions about her new relationship overwhelm her, so do thoughts of Atlas Corrigan, her first love and a link to the past she left behind. He was her kindred spirit, her protector. When Atlas suddenly reappears, everything Lily has built with Ryle is threatened. To me, this book is like, can you pick a trope? Can you just pick one? It definitely covers some heavy topics, like domestic violence, which, trigger warning for that if you want to read this book. I think that, learning about that and understanding that and trying to get into the mind of somebody who's dealing with that is a great thing, because I think it's something that historically people have been afraid to talk about. I just think this book is bad at that. I find it unfortunate that this book chose to touch on such a heavy topic in such a shitty way. That's how I feel. I finished this book feeling very mad that I read it. 1 star. Okay, so after I read that, I was like, okay, we're gonna go back to Mary Kubica, right? Because I loved Local Woman Missing so much. So I read The Good Girl by Mary Kubica. I could be saying her name wrong. Okay, so this one night, Mia Dennett enters a bar to meet her on-again, off-again boyfriend, but when he doesn't show, she unwisely leaves with an enigmatic stranger. At first, Colin Thatcher seems like a safe one-night stand, but following Colin home will turn out to be the worst mistake of Mia's life. When Colin decides to hide Mia in a secluded cabin in rural Minnesota instead of delivering her to his employers, Mia's mother, Eve, and Detective Gabe Hoffman will stop at nothing to find them. But no one could have predicted the emotional entanglements that eventually caused this family's world to shatter. I didn't hate this book, but I felt like she was trying to keep you guessing for like too long. Like, I don't know. It had an interesting plot. It's intriguing, but it kind of goes through the motions of the story too much without really giving you any information ever until the very end. And then at the end, you're like, okay, like, I don't know. That's kind of how I felt. I gave it 3 stars. It wasn't bad, but maybe I'm just comparing some of these too much to Local Woman Missing, which, like I said, I really liked. So that's how I feel about it. It's just a little meh. The next book I read is You Are Not Alone by Greer Hendricks and Sarah Pekkanen? I don't know. The synopsis for this one says, Shay Miller wants to find love, but it eludes her. She wants to be fulfilled, but her job is a dead end. She wants to belong, but her life is increasingly lonely. Until Shay meets the Moore sisters. Cassandra and Jane live a life of glamorous perfection and always get what they desire. When they invite Shay into their circle, everything seems to get better. Shay would die for them to like her. She may have to. I've read books by these authors before, and I've liked them a lot better than this one. This reminds me of an episode of Gossip Girl. Like, this whole book is like an episode of Gossip Girl. With like a tiny bit of murder. So if you like Gossip Girl, sure, go for it. I gave it 2 stars. Next, we have Conviction by Denise Mina. I bought this because I liked the cover. The covers of her books are really cool. But what's inside? The day Anna McDonald's quiet, respectable life exploded started off like all the days before, packing up the kids for school, making breakfast, listening to yet another true crime podcast, and then her husband comes downstairs with an announcement, and Anna is suddenly, shockingly alone. Reeling, desperate for distraction, Anna returns to the podcast. Other people's problems are much better than one's own. A sunken yacht, a murdered family, a hint of international conspiracy, but this case actually is Anna's problem. She knows one of the victims from an earlier life, a life she's taken great pains to leave behind, and she is convinced that she knows what really happened. Listen, you read that synopsis, and if you're like me and you really like true crime podcasts, you're literally shitting your pants excited about this book. And that's exactly what I thought when I read the synopsis in the bookstore. Immediately bought it. I was so excited to read it. I was like, oh my gosh, this is my dream, to listen to an unsolved murder on a true crime podcast and then solve the murder. Are you kidding me? However, the main character in this book is so horribly unlikable. I had a very hard time even finishing it. I forced myself to finish it. And it is so unfortunate because the idea is so great and the ending is great. And like, I mean, I guess I wouldn't say the ending is great, but like the resolution for the crime is cool, and like what they find out and what they learn and what ends up happening. I mean, that's all cool and stuff, but the main character is so bad. Like, Anna McDonald, like I said, there's another character named Finn who she kind of teams up with for this investigation, which that in itself is weird. Like, that whole thing, their connection is just odd. And the main character like does things like she'll ask for help and then she'll get mad when that person's around, and then like, I don't know. And Finn has an eating disorder, and Anna just makes fun of it the whole time, like in a really not cool way, and that was annoying. I don't think I've ever had a situation in which a character ruined a good plot for me so badly. So I gave this book 1 star. Next we have The Mother-in-Law by Sally Hepworth. I'll read a summary. From the moment Lucy met her husband's mother, she knew she wasn't the wife Diana had envisioned for her perfect son. Exquisitely polite, friendly, and always generous, Diana nonetheless kept Lucy at arm's length despite her desperate attempts to win her over. And as a pillar in the community, an advocate for female refugees, and a woman happily married for decades, no one had a bad word to say about Diana. Except Lucy. This book is good. I don't know if you've ever seen The Monster-in-Law with Jane Fonda and Jennifer Lopez. This book is like that, except like not a comedy and like scaled down quite a bit. But the cool thing about this one is it gives you a perspective of the mother-in-law and the daughter-in-law, kind of back and forth about how they interpret the same interactions, which I thought was really cool. And I thought the author did a really good job of explaining like the mother-in-law's behavior and why she reacted that way, and they both are, you're like, yeah, that makes sense. It wasn't like anything like groundbreaking. It was kind of just like a character study. There's a little bit of mystery in there. I don't know, I gave it 3 stars. Okay, now we're getting into some of those like real popular ones. The Paris Apartment by Lucy Foley. Jess needs a fresh start. She's broken alone. She's just left her job under less than ideal circumstances. Her half-brother Ben didn't sound thrilled when she asked if she could crash with him for a bit, but he didn't say no, and surely everything will look better from Paris. Only when she shows up to find a very nice apartment, could Ben have really afforded this? He's not there. The longer Ben stays missing, the more Jess starts to dig into her brother's situation and the more questions she has. This is a thriller, I think, or like a mystery thriller, and it's very slow moving for being a mystery thriller, in my opinion. It's one of those books where it jumps between characters, so if you don't like that, I wouldn't read this. I don't mind that at all. The problem is I would consider Jess to be the main character, and she was so boring, like so boring. And you learn about the people that live in this apartment area, which is like a house, I guess. People are hiding stuff, and then when you find out what it is, you're like, well, yeah, I mean, you're rich people, like whatever. Like, I don't know, it's just like whatever. So the whole point is like Ben is missing, like the brother's missing. You're like, oh my God, the brother's missing. It drags you through such a thick, muddy plot the whole time that I just didn't even give a shit if he was alive or dead by the end of it. You know, that was just kind of how it made me feel. I know a lot of people liked this book, but it wasn't doing it for me. 2 stars. All right, we're trying another Mary Kubica book. I just keep trying. This one's Don't You Cry by Mary Kubica. I will read a summary. Quinn's roommate Esther goes missing and she's ill-equipped to solve the mystery. Alex notices a girl in his small town he's never seen before that draws him in. So this is going back and forth between 2 characters, a guy and a girl. They don't ever really interact with each other, but they're both kind of having some experiences that are eventually connected. This is better than You Are Not Alone, but I still wasn't even like that impressed with it. This was kind of like reading an episode of Criminal Minds, but there wasn't even any Matthew Gray Gubler, so like what's the point? I didn't hate it. I gave it 3 stars. But I mean, it was just okay. It's one of those books that they're like trying to convince you that something, like that you're drawing the correct conclusion, but it's so obvious that you know it's not the correct conclusion to draw. And then it's like the last 6 pages where they tell you exactly what is going on. The Magnolia Palace. This one is very different from all the other ones. And that is because, so I'm in a book club, and this book is one of the books selected for book club. So it's not a book that I ever would have selected on my own, but that is why I'm in a book club, so that I read stuff that I wouldn't ordinarily read. And I'm glad I did. This book was actually pretty good, so I'm going to read a summary. Lillian, who goes by the pseudonym Angelica, was once a revered model for artist sculptures in 1919 New York. After the passing of her mother, she finds herself washed up and out of work. She stumbles accidentally upon the Frick Mansion and ends up working for Helen Frick, daughter of the wealthy art collecting patriarch. In 1966 New York, model Veronica finds herself trapped inside the very same mansion during a winter storm after a photo shoot gone wrong. Turns out Lillian wasn't the only one with something to hide, and there's still the question of the missing Magnolia diamond. Kind of like a historical fiction, although I found out at the end of the book that, this isn't a spoiler, but I found out at the end, I did some research, I googled it. The Frick Mansion is actually a real place, so this all takes place in a real place, which is kind of cool. And there's a tiny bit of truth to the history, I think. The model in New York, Veronica, her story was kind of boring. I didn't really care about it that much, but they didn't dwell on it a lot either. And it was definitely more focused on the historical, like 1919 goings on, which I found more interesting anyway. So overall, I liked this book. I gave it 3 stars. I would have given it 4 stars, but the ending was one of those ones where everything worked out too well. And I know a lot of people are gonna be like, why is that a bad thing? But I really don't like it when books are like, and everybody got what they wanted and everybody was happy and everything was fine. Like, I think that's boring. Like, nobody died. I think that's my like crime mystery thriller preference showing, but everything just had too much of a cherry on top. So, but that's why I didn't give it 4 stars. So 3 stars. The Wife Upstairs by Freida McFadden. So caveat, there is a very popular book called The Wife Upstairs by some lady named Rachel. Just so you're aware, this is a different book. I have some interesting thoughts about this book. It is very similar to another book. Like, So similar that I, a couple days ago, filmed an entire video talking about the similarities between this book and a book I will get to in a second. I decided not to even finish editing that video because I realized I ended up, by comparing the two, pretty much giving away 90% of the plot without spoiling the end of both books. And I decided that was just not something I wanted to put on the internet. So I am going to read the synopsis of this book, and then maybe if you've read this very viral book, you'll be like, wait, that sounds just like this book. If not, I'm gonna get to it in a second. Victoria Barnett has it all. A great career as a nurse practitioner, a handsome and loving husband, a beautiful home in the suburbs, and a plan to fill it with children. Life is perfect, or so it seems. Then she's in a terrible accident and everything falls apart. Now Victoria is unable to walk. She can't feed or dress herself. She can't even speak. She's confined to the top floor of her house with 24-hour care. Sylvia Robinson is hired by Victoria's husband to help care for her. But it turns out Victoria isn't as impaired as Sylvia was led to believe. There's a story Victoria desperately wants to tell, if only she could get out the words. Then Sylvia discovers Victoria's diary hidden away in a drawer, and what's inside is shocking. Is that ringing any bells? Is that ringing any bells? Again, I'm going in order of when I read these books. So I read this book first. This book is not very well known. I googled its hits on TikTok and it had like 5,000 hits on TikTok. So just keep that synopsis in mind. I'm gonna get to the book that I think is very similar to in a second. My thoughts on this book though, it was a good book. It was interesting, it was intriguing. There's, you know, drama, mystery, whatever. You kind of learn about what the wife went through as you read the book, along with the main character, Sylvia. You know, the whole thing, there's a twist at the end, murder, death, blah, blah. It's pretty good. I gave it 3 stars. I had this feeling every time that there was like an exciting like revelation or development that it would just kind of fall short sometimes. I kept getting that feeling, but otherwise I enjoyed the book. It kept my interest and all that stuff. And something I learned later about the author is that she's actually a physician that worked with traumatic brain injury patients. So I thought that was interesting. That definitely kind of showed in the writing and how they described like the wife upstairs and stuff like that. So, okay, so I read 2 more books between that book and the book that I think is very similar to it. So I'm gonna skip those and go to the one that I think is similar. Okay, so the next book is called Verity by Colleen Hoover. I told myself after It Ends With Us that I wasn't gonna read any more Colleen Hoover books, but this book was chosen for book club, so I read it. I'll read a summary. Lowen Ashley is a struggling writer on the brink of financial ruin when she accepts a job offer of a lifetime. Jeremy Crawford, husband of best-selling author Verity Crawford, has hired Lowen to complete the remaining books in a successful series his injured wife is unable to finish. Lowen arrives at the Crawford home, ready to sort through years of Verity's notes and outlines, hoping to find enough material to get her started. What Lowen doesn't expect to uncover in the chaotic office is an unfinished autobiography Verity never intended for anyone to read. Page after page of bone-chilling admissions, including Verity's recollection of the night their family was forever altered. Lowen decides to keep the manuscript hidden from Jeremy, knowing its contents would devastate the already grieving father. But as Lowen's feelings for Jeremy begin to intensify, she recognizes all the ways she could benefit if he were able to read his wife's words. After all, no matter how devoted Jeremy is to his injured wife, a truth this horrifying would make it impossible for him to continue to love her. Maybe on the surface those don't sound that similar, but like I'm telling you, but these books have a very, very, very similar plot. And the big difference is that Colleen Hoover includes a lot more like spicy stuff in her books, which is like whatever, that's personal preference. I highly recommend, if you've read Verity, read The Wife Upstairs and tell me what you think. Come back to this video and tell me what you think, because like I've read a lot of books, and I've read a lot of books with a lot of like similar plots. Like my boss pointed out, like Star Wars and Harry Potter have basically the exact same plot, but they're so different. Like they're so different. These books, very similar. And Verity is not the one that was published first, but I looked Verity up on TikTok and it had like 40 billion hits. Like it's wildly popular. So anyways, just an interesting note. Overall, Verity was an okay book too. I definitely liked it better than It Ends With Us. I gave it a 3-star. Which one did I like better? That one's kind of hard. I would say Verity probably kept my attention a little better, because like I said, a lot of the plot points in The Wife Upstairs I felt like kind of fell short a little bit, and Verity has one of those endings where you're like, wait, what? Wait, did you? So that's kind of cool too. I kind of like books like that, so I don't know. It's hard to say which one I like better. So anyways, just an interesting thing to know. If you read and liked Verity, try reading The Wife Upstairs and tell me what you think. Okay, now we're jumping back to the book that I read right after The Wife Upstairs, and it's called His and Hers by Alice Feeney. Alice Feeney she's been popping up a lot online too. The book that I heard a lot about by her was Rock, Paper, Scissors. That was really popular like last winter on Book Talk. So that was a book that had always been my list to read, but then one of my book club people recommended this book for book club, and so we read it. I highly recommend the audiobook for this book because there's obviously his story and her story. The audiobook narrators are wonderful, and then there's also a third narrator who's like the mystery like murderer or whatever. They're not in it as much, like they're not constantly talking, but they used a really cool like voice modulator on the narrator in the audiobook for the mystery narrator. So I don't know, it just kind of, it's cool. It kind of gives you a cool vibe, and it kind of feels like a documentary interview sort of, because they're like recounting their stories. So I don't know, it's cool. I like the audiobook a lot. I'm gonna read a summary. When a woman is murdered in Blackdown, a quintessentially British village, newsreader Anna Andrews is reluctant to cover the case. Detective Jack Harper is suspicious of her involvement until he becomes a suspect in his own murder investigation. Someone isn't telling the truth, and some secrets are worth killing to keep. I really enjoyed this book. It has that kind of like you're following an investigator and a reporter. It kind of has both sides of that story. They have history in this town. It's twisty turny, like the person that you think did it changes every chapter. I mean, it's one of those. And if you can, I really recommend you listen to the audiobook for this book, because I really think that made the experience so much better. I gave this book 4 stars. I really recommend it, and I'm really excited to read her other book, Rock, Paper, Scissors, which I've heard lots of good things about. It's still on my TBR, and I hope to read it this year. And when I do, I will tell you what I think about it. When the Lights Go Out by Mary Kubica. We're giving Mary Kubica another chance. No more chances, Mary. I am so done with Mary. This book made me so mad, like so mad. If you want to know why, I will make an entire video about this book if anybody wants to hear it, and I will give the spoilers and I will tell you why it pissed me off. But when I tell you this book pissed me off in a not fun, not exciting, not cool way, it really did. And it made me never want to read a book by her again. Which it's one of her earlier books, I think. She still has 2 more books that I haven't read, and they were on my TBR. Not anymore. I am not even gonna read the summary for this book. I hated it that much. I was so angry. So if you wanna know more about why I hate this book so much, leave a comment. If I get 2 comments about that, I will make a video about it. The whole video, just about that. Because that's how mad I am. 1 star. If I could give it 0 stars, I would. I hate to end on that note, but that is my most recent book that I finished. Well, Verity is the most recent book I finished, but I already talked about that one. So anyways, sorry, we're ending on kind of a sour note. In other news, I am reading The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo next, which I'm really excited about. I don't know why it took me this long, but I'm really excited to read it. I really like Taylor Jenkins Reid. I haven't read Daisy Jones and the Six yet either. That one's on my list. The only one of her books I've read is Malibu Rising, which I've discussed in a previous book video of mine. Very good. I love her as an author, so I'm really excited to read that one, and I've only heard good things about this book. Sorry to end on such a bad note, but I hope you enjoyed this video. Again, I'm serious, if I get 2 comments about When the Lights Go Out, I will make a video about it. But otherwise, please give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to my channel for more content. I post lots of different types of videos on my channel, and I hope to see you on my next one. Bye.